and the biggest nurses' union in the country has narrowly voted in support of the principle of assisted dying. So the Royal College of Nursing held the vote at its annual conference ahead of possible legislation changes in the UK. Now, it's currently being made legal in Jersey, and the Isle of Man Parliament has voted to change the law there too. But though a majority of nurses said that they supported patients' right to choose, others said that there was a postcode lottery for palliative care, and they feared that some patients would be driven to assisted dying when it should be a last resort. So are nurses right to back assisted dying? 0207 862 2222 is the number. Belinda, I'll start with you. How do you feel about this?
I think the duty of doctors and nurses is to do good. The Hippocratic Oath, of course, for doctors, I think it has to be about doing good. And as soon as you cross the line into helping to take someone's life, I think that makes you a different being. I don't think you can be called a doctor or a nurse if you're helping someone actually kill themselves. It just blurs the lines. I think that it should be left, if it does happen, which I'm against anyway, it should be left to a different department, because also, the NHS with the bed scandal, a waiting list, you know, during COVID, we were all told, stay at home, save the NHS. I am really worried that if you open the doors to this, people, old people, vulnerable people as well, could feel a burden on the NHS and feel, you know, maybe encouraged indirectly to give the bed up for someone else. And I'm against it. I don't think doctors and nurses in this country should help people kill themselves, no matter how compassionate I feel, how much compassion I feel about those suffering. It is not right. The message it sends is that if you are vulnerable and ill, you know, you can alleviate other people's pain by leaving the world as well, and help the NHS, help your family. And I think it's just very dangerous. And I think do not go gentle into that good night, rage against the dying of the light, and don't give up.
It depends. I mean, your definition of doing good, I think, should include ending someone's intolerable suffering when they are terminally ill, and meaning that they have an option of dying with dignity, with less suffering, when that death is coming anyway. But I will meet you midway, because this is something that, for me, was always just very clear-cut. I just thought the right to dignity in death, to assisted dying, for people in agonising pain, where life every day was a misery, and that we should have the right to that assisted death. But I have got big caveats and doubts, which I didn't used to have. It's interesting when you get older, you sort of, things which seem quite clear-cut, you suddenly realise aren't as clear-cut as they are. And I suppose, you know, if you look at Belgium and the Netherlands, where they've introduced this a long time ago, they've extended the conditions for which people are eligible for this to intolerable mental distress. So that includes people with severe depression. That doesn't sit well with me at all. Well,
a Dutch lady who's 29 has just been assisted in dying,
which has been
for depression.
Incredibly controversial.
Very controversial. Yeah. And the other point I'd make as well is, well, the point you made about palliative care is at the moment we don't invest properly in palliative care. And, you know, look, my dad died of cancer. He died of advanced prostate cancer. And he was very lucky. He was very fortunate that he had a hospice, Marie Curie. Everyone donates to them. They're incredible. But they do incredible work ensuring a comfortable death in those circumstances. But there are lots of people with lots of conditions where, frankly, they die in, you know, we're not investing in ensuring people have the support they have to make their lives, you know, less intolerable.
But surely nurses should then be focusing on that, on improving end-of-life care and pain relief and making conditions better so there is no suffering, instead of offering this very easily abused, very easy to move the goalposts so people with mental conditions or younger people, you know, that lovely rugby player that just passed away.
Yeah, the
message he sent out, you know, was that his struggle, his journey, it was so courageous, would have helped everyone who had been suffering to fight on. And if it becomes the case that when you get given a terminal illness, it's like, well, you know, I've got this option now.
Well, look, I had a friend who died of motor neuron disease at the age of 33, and, you know, different people have different choices in terms of how they wish to resolve the fate which has been imposed upon them by a terrible lottery. What my view is, you're absolutely right. My fear is, as things stand, there is that pressure people might feel that even if and there are stories often of doctors seeming to put pressure on people.
Yeah.
But the danger is if someone is terminally ill and they have round-the-clock care, for example, from their relatives, that whether or not that pressure exists, they might feel, I am a burden and there is an option which exists, which means I can stop being a burden, given I am stopping my loved ones living the life they would be having if I wasn't here. That's definitely a problem, and it's very hard to resolve. But we've got
that may already exist, though. They just don't have the ability to make the decision on how they go.
But
how do you solve that problem?
Well, it becomes very difficult. That's why, look, my own view is you need to define properly. We need what a terminal illness actually is, because some people, when they're diagnosed, it's not always clear how long that actually means. What we mean by an intolerable existence, for example, where life is simply unbearable. And there are conditions where people just find it absolutely unbearable, but people differ. There are, for some who, motor neuron disease, for example, where they opt to, to the very end to be with their family, but others don't want to go through that. They just simply don't want to go through what is an illness which often can take 2 or 3 years, where your body just shuts down and people can't cope with that. So I think we need, everyone, where you have like a few doctors per person to be definite about their condition, about their well-being and about the decision, and to make sure there's no pressure on them. That's not easy, but I don't think we should end up in a situation where people who are in absolute agonising pain, where their life is completely intolerable, where we simply say, we will never give you that choice and you will die when you die, regardless of circumstances. That does not sit well. So we've got to find a way of balancing all of those.
All right, let's go to the calls and see what you at home think about this. Emma from London, you're up first. How do you feel, first of all, it was a narrow vote, but how do you feel that nurses had voted sort of in favour of the principle of assisted dying?
I agree with it, because we have more compassion for our dogs or our cats or our whatever, and if they're suffering, we'll put them out of pain rather than watch them suffering. And it's like, as human beings, we've got a brain, we can answer for ourselves, we can say what we want, but we don't know whether our dog or cat would want to be put to sleep. But however, we have more compassion for them and don't watch them suffering than we do for human beings and other members of our family.
I suppose, Emma, we're probably less concerned, and this may be wrong, but as a society we're less concerned as to whether a dog or a cat or a loved pet is put down too early or unnecessarily than we are a human being. They are slightly different, and concerns are different when it comes to our animals and in humans. Now, the other thing about your pets is you're making a decision for that pet. You're absolutely right. You don't know whether they're quite happy to sit in the suffering or not. We would never pass a law where somebody was making a decision about another person's death. That's not what this is about.
But the point is the person will be making their own decisions. The person you can't get the family make the decision for them.
No.
The person has to make the decision for themselves.
But there is a problem with
you're not doing
pressure
the same
being put
thing
on.
then, is it?
No, but there is a problem with pressure being put on, and that's quite hard to spot. There is an opening there for this to be used in a negative way, isn't there?
I think that most people would want their relatives to stick around for as long as possible. I don't think most people would be putting pressure on their loved ones for that to happen. But
broadly on your side,
I think they wouldn't want to watch them suffering, and I don't think that it should be an issue around that. It should be, if the person is suffering and the person wants to go themselves and they're making a decision for themselves, then that surely is a personal decision, and it doesn't come down to people's religious beliefs or anything else, because that person who's got that religious belief wouldn't want to go for the death in the first place.
Well, Emma, I'm broadly on your side. I mean, just in terms of cats and dogs, obviously, look, I've got 2 cats, I love them very much. They don't know whether they're alive. They live in the moment. They have no existential sense of self. We value human life, obviously, far more rightly than we do the lives of cats or dogs. But I suppose, I don't think it's always the case, if I'm honest, about relatives and what they think about their loved ones who are in who have those sorts of health conditions. You know, when my dad was dying, I would have, if I had a choice between him living longer but being in pain, and living not as long but not being in pain, then obviously I'd have preferred him to live for less time. I wouldn't have thought to myself, I want more time with him. That would have actually been selfish. The point I'm making is, if you're a round-the-clock carer for a relative, it's entirely conceivable that you would think to yourself, this has taken over my life, they have no quality of life, and it would just be better if they were dead. And that doesn't make that person a bad person at all. I don't think it does. That doesn't mean they don't love that person, but it makes it complicated when you're in a position of two people trying to judge what's for the best for themselves and for the person who's terminally ill. It's complicated, isn't it?
I think Emma already made the point that you wouldn't be getting, in this situation, you wouldn't be having family members making that decision. It would be the individual's decision, absolutely.
No, I get that, but people will always have... If I was terminally ill and my partner was looking after me all the time, I would always be thinking to myself, I'm stopping their life. Them doing what they want to do with their life. I wouldn't be able to stop myself thinking that. So we need very clear checks and balances, because that's the danger.
Emma, so that's what we're talking about here, and that is the concern. Not that anybody is right or wrong, just that there is an element where somebody could put that pressure on themselves and make a decision based on how they feel other people feel about them.
You get people like taking overdoses of their tablets and stuff and doing that anyway.
True.
If they want to take the pressure off their families and stuff. So it's as broad as it's long. If you're of that kind of mind to do that, then you might do that anyway.
I'm concerned it transforms the relationship of trust between patient and doctor, or patient and nurse as well, because as soon as that element's introduced, that it's a possibility, you could just, end your own life and make everyone's life easier, and, as I said, free up the beds. I think it does change the nature. Who knows the pressure that nurses and doctors might be under to suggest it, or have leaflets in the hospital about it. It would be... Or
the overheard conversation. Probably.
The overheard, or, it would relieve pressure on the NHS. I just think crossing that line right now, rather than focusing on improving palliative care and this human journey that belongs to all of us of death. I don't want it to be that humans who aren't perfect, humans that are disabled or have terminal illness, are suddenly not worth the value of their time.
If we invest in palliative care, and I mean, for me, that's the thing, we'd have to massively increase funding for palliative care. And so I don't think it's either or.
OK, Emma, thank you very much for your call. Sean from County Durham, what's your thoughts on this assisted dying?
Hi, I love my mother to bits, right? She died of a few heart attacks. She died of massive heart attack, but she had little heart attacks. Then she went to the hospital and signed this form, do not resuscitate. Now, that's a form of assisted dying, in my eyes, right? If she wanted to, if she didn't want treatment, so she passed away.
OK, and how did that make you feel?
She signed the form.
Yes, and
right? I think that's what should happen. If you're terminally ill, you should have a card on you, like a donor card.
It is different though, Sean. When you have a heart attack, a do not resuscitate means you don't want any further...
What's different about it?
Well,
they cannot do nothing to you.
Okay, Sean.
They cannot save your life.
Sean, if you let me tell you, because it's preemptive, isn't it? You've not had the heart attack yet. You've not had the final blow, the thing that's going to kill you. You've had enough suffering and you want to make the decision to go peacefully. That's assisted dying. Do not resuscitate means something terrible has happened and you want to be left to die in that situation.
Well, what's the difference?
What's your question? What's the moral difference in that? I've told you that...
Somebody is dying in front of you, right, with a heart attack.
Yeah.
And they sign that paper saying, do not resuscitate. That is a form of assisted dying, in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, resuscitation doesn't...
There's no assisting.
It doesn't guarantee you... I mean, resuscitation doesn't... I mean, I think most don't survive resuscitation anyway, do they? In that situation, I don't think most people survive. If they do... So it's an attempt to revive someone when their heart has stopped. And I think in most cases that doesn't work.
But in actual, it's completely different, because in one you're asking for assistance for the death and the other one you're asking for no assistance so that you can be left to die. So there is a difference, Sean, but I get your moral argument. If we're going to allow people to ask not to be saved, then you're giving someone that bodily autonomy over that. What's the difference between giving them the bodily autonomy to say, I no longer want to suffer? Belinda?
Well, for me as well, I think I totally agree with you. I think there's a huge difference between someone asking another party to help you in your own death and doing signing a do not resuscitate form. I think it's very different.
Are you comfortable with do not resuscitate?
I am. My friend had that on her. My friend had cystic fibrosis, who I was very close with, and she signed that form just because she had reached 40, and that's quite an age for the disease, and she just didn't want to be resuscitated in a much worse state, and
that's what happens.
And I totally understood that, but I don't think any line has been breached there. I think as soon as you ask a third party to help you in that, I mean, have we thought about the nurses or the doctors actually, how they feel in being responsible for also helping taking the lives?
I'm not sure whether you would, because part of the legislation can be brought in that wouldn't compel you to be part of that if it's something that you absolutely disagreed with. But we see from this vote that actually most nurses would be happy to at least enter the conversation about it. Sean, I'm just out of interest because you were very passionate there, but and rightfully so, very personal story to you. When your mother signed the do not resuscitate, how did that make you as her son, as her loved one feel?
The family, she was at peace, mate, Pet. You know what I mean? She couldn't take any more. She must have had about 9 little heart attacks before the massive one.
So you were.
And then she signed the form in front of us in the hospital.
And you were comfortable with that,
We
Sean?
were all for it, like.
Okay, thank you very much for your call and sharing that story. And again, I'm so sorry for your loss. Pam, also from County Durham, how do you feel about this vote? It's nurses saying that they would be sort of principally in support of assisted dying and want to be part of that conversation. Does that make you feel slightly uneasy?
No, it doesn't. I think the nurses have a right to vote whichever way they want to if they've been asked about it. In my personal experience, my mum passed away last Christmas. She'd had Alzheimer's for about 10 years. Yeah. I'd been in a care home for 6.5 years. No quality of life for the last 4 years. And to be perfectly honest, I've been wishing for this to come in for so long. And to be honest, if it had been in, I would have done it for her. Because it was not my mum. She would not want to live the way she lived for the last 4 years of her life.
Pam, I'm glad you raised this because this was talking about dementia. I think was been missing from this conversation altogether. To be fair, and my grandmother died of Alzheimer's, and having seen what she went through, I would never ever wish to go through that. I would definitely want assisted dying, and I think that's such a clear-cut case you've brought up, to be honest.
But Pam, for those who haven't had somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's in their family and haven't seen that sort of demise happen, because sometimes it can be very, very long. When you said it, the last couple of years of her life, she had no quality of life. What were you qualifying as quality?
She could not do one single thing for herself.
Okay.
Nothing. I went in every other day to feed her because she couldn't even do that anymore. She couldn't walk. She couldn't talk.
Okay.
She could do nothing at all for herself.
So in a sense, sort of trapped in her own body?
Yes. And I looked at her fading away and it was absolutely dreadful. Yeah. And I honestly wish if assisted dying hadn't been in, if euthanasia had been here, I would have gone for that as well. And to be fair, if I'd had the money, I would have taken her to Switzerland. Yeah. I had power of attorney and I could have done that. But I could not afford to do it.
I'm so sorry you had to go through that. The power of attorney is actually an interesting one as well, because this might be, it isn't brought into this obviously, but it could be a slippery slope into that sort of situation where you're handing the power of something like that over to somebody else, which is a whole other debate. But Pam, thanks for sharing your story.